you lived in the days when push-button phones were fashionable, you certainly know about BlackBerry. I think everyone wanted one in the late 2000s. I really wanted a BlackBerry too, they seemed amazing to me. But 17 years later I've only managed to buy one at the flea market for around $4. But do you know what I've never seen? Someone playing games on a BlackBerry phone. I didn't even think you could install games until I recently discovered they support Java games, like most phones from that era. But first of all, I can't play any games until I disinfect the phone with alcohol. It's filthy. After cleaning it thoroughly, I discovered a button dedicated to voice commands, like kind of Siri, but before Siri even existed. Check battery.
Battery, medium.
It seems pretty interesting. As for the camera, it's not the best, but for 2009, this phone takes fairly decent pictures. In my hand is a BlackBerry Bold 9700, released around 2009, and today I'll be trying out some games on it to see if it's worth the experience. And for those who own the BlackBerry and maybe played games on it, this video will be a nostalgic trip. Let's get started! Let's start with BrickBreaker, a pre-installed game on BlackBerry phones and a true classic. The goal is simple: use a ball to break all the bricks while controlling a pedal at the bottom of the screen. I played similar games as a child through under different names and made by other brands, so the concept isn't exactly unique. The game itself isn't the most thrilling, but it's perfect for passing time. I control the pedal using the touch-sensitive button located in the center of the phone. While it's not the most precise, the overall experience is quite decent. The best part is that I don't need to rely on any additional button. It's easy to imagine business people with Blackberries playing this during boring meetings. I think I've broken enough bricks, so let's move on to the next game, which is also pre-installed. Texas Hold'em King 2, a poker game. I should mention I'm not a poker expert, but I'll try my best. I joined a quick match with $1,000 balance, playing alongside 5 virtual players. To select call, raise or fold, I use the Q and P keys. Thankfully, no many buttons are needed here either. I'm not feeling too lucky with a 9 and a 3, they're pretty far apart. I'll fold this round, but next round I'm gonna all in. On the table, we've got 2 tens and a queen, so there's a good chance I didn't win much. Most likely the winner had higher cards than mine, or maybe even a pair. We are starting the second round with a couple of low cards, a 2 and a 5 in hand, but there is a chance for a straight, considering there's an ace and a 3 on the table. So I'm gonna all in, most as a bluff to scare the others, but also hoping for a 4 to land, which will give me a straight, but too late. Everyone folded, so I won $78, which is not bad anyway. This round I won't try to scare anyone at the table with an all-in, so we take it easy. I've got a 9 and an ace, and there's already a 9 on the table, which doesn't help me much because the last player already folded, so we win this one too. In the end, we are walking away with almost $100 in profit from the table, and of course from this game as well, because we are moving on to the next one. Tower Blocks is a game that has been released in various versions across different platforms. If I remember correctly, I've played this on old Java phones, where it was in 2D, but also on more powerful devices, where it was in 3D. This time I'm playing a pretty interesting 3D version that runs smoothly. I was never a huge fan of the game, but it's definitely one to try when you are bored. It can get pretty frustrating, especially towards the end when you mess up and knock the whole building down. I managed to build the most crooked tower in the world, but now let's move on to the next game, which I think is a bit more modern, as it's a remake of the famous Flappy Bird. Do you remember that game? The one that made you wanna throw your iPhone 4 out of the window? It was the game everyone had on their iPods. Back in 2014, YouTube was flooded with videos of people getting so frustrated they destroyed everything because of that game. What a time! This version is really well made, maybe a bit more complex. You've got more birds to choose from and more maps to get frustrated with. This game is just as frustrating and difficult as I remember. I honestly feel like ripping the battery off of the phone and tossing it across the room, but I take a deep breath and try to beat my high score of 6. When enough is enough, we move on. Now we are speeding into the next game, just like Need for Speed, trying to claim first place. We'll do a quick race to see how the game runs and what the graphics are like, though I have a feeling it's gonna be 2D. There are so many Need for Speed games for Java, but only a few are really cool. I used to play all kind of car games on my old Nokia 6070, like Asphalt or Need for Speed, but they were all 2D. I always wished I could play 3D car games, but back then I didn't have a phone powerful enough for that. Coming back to this game, what can I say? I've never been a big fan of 2D racing games with this type of perspective, except for Raymond Kart. That game will always have a special place in my heart. To be honest, I didn't expect the BlackBerry keyboard to be such a hassle to use. To play this game, I have to focus really hard on which keys I press. They are so tiny that there's a good chance I'll accidentally hit multiple buttons and lose control of the car. I didn't see this coming. Speaking of Android and iOS game ports to Java, back in early 2010, Java game developers made several attempts to bring popular titles from newer platforms to older phones. A good example, Pizza Ninja 4, a knockoff of Fruit Ninja with an incredibly annoying soundtrack, and a much worse design and gameplay. A game originally made for touchscreen devices, awkwardly ported to button-based phones, where you are supposed to slice fruits using buttons. Honestly, it's terrible. The gameplay is nothing special, and the cringy-worthy background music makes you wanna quit and uninstall it immediately. But I'll play it a few more seconds for you guys, at least that much. I'll try to never open this game again, purely because of the soundtrack. The next game closes itself if I press the OK button one more time, which is super weird. Racing Rustle is another 2D car game made by Disney Mobile, but it runs at a much lower frame rate than the previous car game I tried. The experience isn't great. Once again, I'm dealing with tiny buttons that are hard to press, and I'm really struggling to get used to this miniature keyboard, especially when it comes to controlling a car in a video game. Some BlackBerry game developers use WASD, while others opt for 2486, and it's hard to get used to if you playing multiple games, especially since the keys are so close to each other. Car games on BlackBerry? Tough if you've got adult-sized hands, but super easy if you've got the hands of a child. Let's move on to Jewel Fever, a sort of Candy Crush from the 2000s. It's the classic match 3 formula where you connect 3 or more of the same type of gems. Some people even think Candy Crush invented this genre of games. I used to play all sorts of knockoff versions of Jewel Quest on the phones from my childhood, and this game on the BlackBerry feels very similar. Finally, a game with relaxing controls. I actually recommended this one. This game really feels nostalgic. You can match 5 gems of the same type to create a bomb that clears all the gems of the same color, giving your score a big boost. It's a game with mechanics that are well known to almost everyone these days. Thanks, Candy Crush. Another car game, Championship Street Racing. A game that doesn't just disappoint with its eternity-long loading time, but also with the most horrible and confusing controls I've encountered so far. If you want to turn left, you press the A key. To turn right, you press S. But if you accidentally hit the neighboring key, D to be exact, it'll turn left again. This makes me mess up constantly. Any game of this type played on a BlackBerry becomes significantly harder simply because of this tiny keyboard. Time for a game with simple controls, and what better choice than Tetris? It's a classic, but with the same straightforward mechanics we all know. I didn't play much Tetris back in the day, and I was never a huge fan, but on a slightly larger screen like these BlackBerries, it feels surprisingly decent. The pieces are controlled using the touch-sensitive button, again, which can be a bit tricky since it's not the most precise. If you're not careful, you might place a piece in the wrong spot if you rush. But as long as you take your time, it's manageable. The beauty of this game is that you only need one button to play. However, as the level progresses and the speed increases, the game is bound to become much more challenging on this phone, all thanks to that finicky touch button. In my opinion, the simplest and coolest game on this phone has to be Basketball Dunk. It's a super straightforward, you just need to focus on making the shot using the touch button. The game's physics are really well done and feel satisfying. At first you might struggle a bit while getting used to the ball and the mechanics, but once you get the hang of it, you'll just want to keep beating your own high score. It's the kind of game where you can easily spend 20-30 minutes playing and time flies without even you realizing it. If I've taken 9 shots and I'm still at 0% of my target, I have no idea what kind of score I'm supposed to reach. That being said, This doesn't even come closer to the difficulty of Flappy Bird, which I played earlier. At least this game gives you a fair chance to rack up some points. It can get frustrating if you press the touch button too much, the ball will fly way too high, making it difficult to recover. In the end, I finished with just 1% of the target completed, so let's move on to the next game. The last two games I'll be trying out with you are Medal of Honor and Fantasy Warrior Legends, but I must mention that I didn't get to play much because the controls were horrible, especially for this type of games where you need to shoot, strike, switch weapons and access the inventory. In Medal of Honor, I managed to take down a few enemies with a weapon, but in Fantasy Warrior Legends I couldn't get past a certain point because I couldn't use the sword properly. Sometimes when I pressed the button, my character wouldn't swing the sword, but it was really random, which is very strange. And no, the BlackBerry keyboard isn't defective, it's just nearly impossible to use for gaming, or maybe I'm not just used to this tiny keyboard. Anyway, I've come to a conclusion. And I can say that just seeing a QWERTY keyboard on a phone doesn't mean it's gonna to offer a gaming experience similar to that on a computer keyboard. It's actually a nightmare. I did try to install a few 3D games like Asphalt 4, but it didn't work at all, even though the game runs smoothly in 3D on this Nokia. Just look how well Asphalt 4 run on this Nokia, and I'm excited to hear in the comments what model this is exactly. In the future, I'd like to make a video with this phone and play some truly awesome 3D games. Also, let me know which models do you recognize from my desk, and if you want me to make a video in the future about a specific phone, feel free to recommend it in the comments. BlackBerry remains a business phone, as it was originally designed. People who owned it probably didn't have time for games, they were more focused on sending important emails or answering calls, so there are better options for Java gaming. It's still a cool phone, like the others, but if I were to go back in time and have it as my main phone, I'd probably get used to the small keys. However, that wasn't the case now. What do you think? Would you try playing a few games on a BlackBerry? Subscribe to the channel for more videos and leave a comment down below. I read and reply to almost all of your comments. See you soon!